Hello and welcome. This is Gabriel Custodiet of Watchman Privacy, privacy practitioner, consultant, author, and frontline fighter in the push for privacy. I know why you're here. Like the rest of us here in the resistance, you're trying to escape the technocratic apparatuses that you see enveloping you and crushing your freedoms. That's why I created all of this, all without sponsors. I hope you enjoy this show, but then when you're ready to take the next steps to secure your privacy and your future, visit my website, escapethetechnocracy.com, to start the real journey. Your support alone determines the future of the show. See you there. I'm very pleased today to be joined by Jeremy Nell, otherwise known as Jerm, Jerm, and he is the producer of Jerm Warfare. This is a fascinating brand. The website is jermwarfare.com. That's Jerm warfare.com. Very interesting podcast. I've been on that show, I think more than once. I think I've been there on there twice. Fascinating show. Get some really interesting guests. And Jeremy, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm well. Thanks for having me, Gabriel. I like that you spelt Jerm with a J. A lot of people spell it with a G.
Well, the problem is because you're so shadow banned and forbidden on the internet, people, they need the direct links. And, Jerm, people don't think to spell Jerm with a J. So yeah, Jerm.
Let me rephrase that. You won't mind if I just quickly give you the history of where that name came from, because some people have asked.
Go for it.
I thought you might have known, but actually I don't think you do know. So when I was in school, my nickname was Jerm. I don't really know where it came from, and people would just call me Jerm. And then when I became a career cartoonist, my first book that came out was a play on Jerm Warfare with the germ, the bacteria, and of course my name, which was just a very pleasant play on words, and I think that was around 2012. Jerm Warfare, and I've got the book here, in fact. So it's not actually anything to do with Infowars by Alex Jones. Some people think that I'm copying him. I didn't even know that he existed in 2012.
There we go. Yeah, that is what I thought it might be. But either way, it's a play on words, and so it's Jerm, Jerm Warfare. And if you look in your podcast player, your RSS feed, which is how you should be consuming this stuff, because YouTube can't censor that, then yeah, it's Jerm Warfare. Great show to follow. Great art as well. Let's start with that, Jeremy, because you're by trade, I believe, a cartoonist, and then you got into this show. Just give a little bit of your origin story. Obviously, people can tell from your accent you're South African as well. Just maybe give a little bit of your origin story to the point where we are today, where you have an interesting show that gets some great guests on.
Yeah, thanks. And I think you have been on more than once, and I know that you are scheduled to come on again soon, so that's great.
Perfect.
Yes, I am South African. I live in Cape Town, which is the very bottom tip of the African continent. And as I'm talking to you right now, I'm looking out. I've got a studio that I record from, but right now I've opened all the curtains because this is audio. And I'm looking out and I can see vineyards in front of me. We live on a farm and it's just absolutely beautiful, blue skies. I really do enjoy living on the African continent. I got into political cartooning 2005, I think. Left my corporate job, no experience in cartooning. I did study art at university, but I failed. Isn't that weird? How do you fail art? Who fails art? Anyway, I failed art, and and I was kind of advised, not to go into the art field, and that's exactly what I did. I went into the art field. But the interesting thing about political cartooning, and I didn't at the time think, I want to become a political cartoonist. It's just a sort of subgenre. I just always enjoyed drawing cartoons. From when I was a kid, I used to draw in my Bible at Sunday school and in my textbooks at school and that sort of thing. And it just seemed like a natural extension of me, of my life. And it's a terrible career option. I wouldn't recommend it. How do you get a job as a cartoonist? It's very, very difficult. It's more of a calling, I suppose. You just really enjoy it and hope that somebody pays you along the line. And that is kind of what happened. So I started out in 2005, just kind of drawing for a handful of newspapers, comic strip that wasn't really political at all. I mean, I had no political intuition. And in about 2007, I was offered a position at a major newspaper in the country, which kind of was, I suppose, a break for me. And yet, although I wasn't drawing politically, I was now being published in a really large newspaper. And I think it was about 2009, 2008, 2009. My editor said to me, "Look, why don't you start making some political commentary? What can go wrong? The worst that can happen is you'll get fired." And I mean, he was obviously joking, but I said to him, "Look, I don't know what to do politically." And he gave me advice, and I've never forgotten this. He said, "Look, here's what you do. Knock them down when they're up and lift them up when they're down." And I just thought that was such beautiful advice. I've never forgotten it. I've always tried to apply that. And that's kind of what I did. And I got into sort of political satire. I started learning how to draw caricatures. I started copying other cartoonists. And I think about 2 or 3 years later, I won the largest awards in the country in the field of journalism. I'm not a journalist, but political cartooning does fall under journalism because there's nowhere else it can fall under. And then I published my first couple books through Penguin Publishers around 2012. And then during the 20 teens, is that what we call it, Gabriel? 20 teens?
Sure. Why not?
I have no idea what you call that era. I don't even know what you call the era between 2000 and 2010, the 20s. No, I don't know. I don't know what you call it. Yeah. So the 20 teens, I started finding myself politically, as it were. I started becoming kind of more ideological aware. I was reading a bunch of different books at that stage. I was going down the roads of sort of free market Austrian economics. I was reading Friedrich Hayek and Milton Friedman, and although he was more of a Chicago school, I believe, of economics, and I was reading Murray Rothbard and Ludwig von Mises, and a lot of names that only those who know a little bit about free market economics might recognize, and kind of found myself, trapped in those sort of political left, right, center labels, which I don't really believe exist anymore. And then towards 2020, I was getting bored. 2019ish, getting bored because I was running out of things to say, and I realized that podcasting had become a thing, and I thought, well, let me try my hand at chatting to people, because political satire is really about ideas more than it is about artwork. It is, of course, artwork, but it's a combination of the two. And I thought, well, a great extension of the ideas battle which was taking place in my cartoon work, could happen vocally. And so that's what I did. I had a really crappy microphone and a webcam, and I started using YouTube to live stream, and it just kind of grew from there. And I was chatting to more local folks at that time, and then I tried my hand at a few internationals. And when 2020 happened, that was beautiful in some ways, because it forced a lot of people to to tune in, and then because it was going so well, I upgraded my gear, bought better microphones and all that kind of stuff, better cameras, and took it a bit more seriously. I found that I could actually have a little bit of an income from it. And then, of course, around 2022, 2023, I was contacted by TNT Radio. I think you might have appeared on my TNT show. I cannot remember now. And it was like this sort of new alternative, independent radio, 24-hour radio station coming out of Australia, but with an international target. And I think I became the anchor show for about 2 years, and then the entire network just crashed. They completely tanked, and then about a year and a half ago, I started with UK column, and so that's where I am now. So I now do a daily show, Gabriel, and I draw a lot less frequently than I did, and I'm quite happy because I've done almost 10,000 published cartoons, so I'm fairly burnt out, and I do need a bit of a break now from drawing all the time.
No, it's great. And then I'm just scrolling on some of your podcast episodes here. You're asking a lot of questions about things that you're not supposed to ask, and so this got you banned off of a bunch of platforms to the point where I'm recommending people go directly to your website or tracking down your podcast feed. Could you tell a little bit of that banning story and cancellation?
Should I also
The good stuff.
should I speak with a bit of censorship here?
Nah.
Okay.
No.
Well, so I would be accused, I suppose, of being a conspiracy theorist, because the moment you think critically about something, that's the label that gets attached to you. So any deviation from the mainstream or from the official narrative of anything will of course mean that you get prepackaged and pigeonholed as a conspiracy theorist, and that of course, if anybody knows, is a wonderful weaponized tool of the CIA going back to the 1960s when JFK was assassinated, and the CIA didn't want anybody questioning the Warren Commission, and so they put out an internal memo to all the agencies saying that they need to basically ridicule and stop any kind of questioning that was going on in the media, because the media generally at that stage did a better job than what the media does today. The New York Times, would you believe it? The New York Times, of all newspapers, actually they did some journalism back then, and that's how they figured out that the CIA were trying to restrict dissenting views. They managed to get the internal memo, which confirmed it. And that was where the term conspiracy theorist was actually used by the CIA internally. And of course, today, when people label me or you or anybody as a conspiracy theorist, they're kind of just doing the work of the CIA, because it's just another way of trying to shut down a conversation. So if I say 9/11 was an inside job, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. Why? Because I'm now saying something that doesn't align with the official narrative. So my tagline is the battle of ideas, and it's not something that's a money-making gimmick. If it were, I certainly wouldn't have, chosen the topics that I've chosen. There's certainly more lucrative angles to focus on if you're going to be a money-making podcast. But I'm more interested in it's not just the ideas battle, but it's about what are bad ideas and what are good ideas, and how do we figure out what is true about all things. It's a very, very wide net to throw, but many topics lead to other topics, and that's how I end up with so many different discussions. A lot of it is fringe, but I find that interesting. I'm absolutely fascinated because remember, people who I interview don't necessarily themselves think that they are wacko. It's only the people who don't like an idea who will deem somebody else to be a nut job. So if I interview a flat earther, now I don't necessarily think that Earth is flat. I don't know what I think about Earth. Let me just say that. I don't buy NASA's official story on most things. But I don't think Earth is necessarily flat. I do think that perhaps we just don't entirely know the truth. But am I going to deem a flat Earth guest a nut job? No, because he doesn't think he's a nut job. So who am I to cast that label? Do I have a monopoly on truth? No. So I'm going to give him a chance to present his case. Why? Because most people don't want to give him a chance. They'll just laugh him off. But it was Galileo who was laughed off back in the day when he presented a new way of looking at Earth's position to the sun. He was committed to, well, not to prison, but to what do you call it when you can't leave your house?
House arrest, I guess.
Yeah, house arrest. Yeah, for the rest of his life, he wasn't allowed to be part of society. And yet today, we look back at Galileo and go, oh yeah, he was on point. But then he was the conspiracy theorist. He was the outcast. So I certainly am not going to think that of my guest. I always assume that my guest knows a lot more than I do on whatever topic that is. And so funnily enough, though, it was Spotify that banned me for the first time after I did a show about Earth being flat. It was bizarre. Yeah. And then after that, well, I don't even know if it was after or before, but I've been banned 3 times from YouTube. My channel's been taken down. I don't have a YouTube channel right now as you and I are talking. My stuff appears on UK Columns channel. And a few weeks ago, one of my videos that I did for UK Column or podcast episodes, because it's both video and audio, it was taken down from Facebook. Spotify has banned me 3 times, but currently I'm not banned from Spotify. I'm not banned from where else? I don't think I'm banned from anywhere at the moment. Amazingly enough, if I were to start up a YouTube channel, I suspect I could survive for a while, but I'd have to put up very kind of sanitized versions of a lot of my shows. Amazingly, Apple has never banned me or censored me. I find that absolutely fascinating.
Facebook did, though, right?
Facebook has banned me a few times. Twitter also, or X. Funny, yes, actually X under Elon has also suspended my account, by the way. I did a episode with Max Egan in which he explained why the Christchurch mosque massacre that happened, I think it was in 2018 or 2019 in New Zealand, in the little city of Christchurch. Remember that with a lone gunman allegedly went and shot a whole lot of Muslims. Well, he gave an extensive breakdown of why that was a whole government cover-up, and it wasn't a lone gunman. There was a whole operation involved. Now, the New Zealand government sent me an official takedown notice, like an actual government document demanding that I remove the entire podcast episode from my website. Of course, I refused. And then I went onto X, not Twitter, but onto X, and then said, this is what the New Zealand government has demanded I do. Here is the episode for you to listen to. And what did X do? It suspended my account, saying that I violated, conditions to do with foreign governments or something. I don't know. I can't remember the exact reason. It doesn't really matter. But they suspended my account because I shared that. And any sharing of that particular episode, I think even to this day, is not allowed on X. So that was an interesting one also.
What about Substack?
Oh, I do use Substack, but I don't use Substack that much anymore. I'm slowly moving away from Substack, very, very gradually, because I think that Substack is starting to be influenced by the digital ID creep. They're starting to ask for age verification in certain countries and that kind of thing, and I don't like that. So I think ultimately we need to be in control of our own work, and that's why on my website jermwarfare.com, if you don't mind me plugging it, I actually have my own premium video service. So if YouTube does take down any of my UK column stuff, for example, I just upload it onto my premium service. I also have a premium audio podcast, and I use podcasting 2.0, which is a bit more censorship resistant. So you're quite right when you talk about the RSS feed. I also have an RSS feed and all that. So I don't think it's entirely possible now to censor me, but it is possible to take me down from a number of the big platforms. But again, as I just said, that doesn't seem to be the trend at the moment. There does seem to be a lot more freedom, just for the time being.
Now, and respect for running your own stuff, by the way, that is not that easy. But at the same time, everybody can and should be looking into it, having your own website, hosting your own files and all this sort of stuff. very good, and respect for doing that. When I've been on your show, we've talked obviously a lot about privacy technology and such. I saw recently you've kind of have a new aptitude, new interest in these sorts of things. You were talking about Linux recently. Have you made any privacy tech changes in the last bit of time?
Uh, yeah. I've got a love-hate relationship with tech. I find it immensely difficult to do what I do on Linux. I know that you say Linux. I have no idea how you pronounce it. And I know that there's an ongoing battle between the pronunciations. I just say Linux because I find it awkward to say Linux. But don't judge me. I years ago tried my hand at Linux. I installed Ubuntu, which of course, as you know, is a South African variation of Linux. I tried OpenSUSE, Fedora, and a few variations. I didn't get my hands onto Arch Linux because I am not that hardcore and I don't know how to code or anything like that. But the problem was, Gabriel, I got frustrated because nothing was working. I spent 50% of my day tinkering, trying to get things to work for the sake of privacy and saying that I use Linux. And it wasn't. It was annoying me too much. And so then I just thought, well, you know what, stuff this. I'm going to move back to Apple. Now I do have a Linux machine right here next to me. I've got an Apple and I've got a Linux machine, and the Linux machine is it's a beast. And I got it from what are the guys called? I've now gone blank.
System 76, Tuxedo.
No, I forget the name now. Above phone.
Oh, okay.
With Hakeem Anwar, great guy, great guy. They sent me one of their top end Linux machines, and I've got that, and it's an absolute beast. But I just struggle too much because I'm creative, and I like doing media stuff when I'm not doing, drawing cartoons or doing podcasts, or whatever, and then to get recording, I record music just for fun, and I play guitar and all that kind of stuff, and MIDI keyboards and things, and just to get any of that stuff working Linux is always a nightmare.
Right.
And I just can't. I just don't want to spend 2 hours out of 3 hours trying to get stuff to work. And I understand the necessity for Linux, but it's a battle that I'm willing to lose for the sake of getting other stuff done. So what I do then is, like Catherine Austin Fitz argues, technology is a tool that can be used for good and bad. So if you are going to buy into some of the mainstream tech, then do whatever you can to try and buffer against surveillance, etc. So, like, for example, I don't use any Google apps at all, nothing. The only Google app I use is Google Maps when I'm driving, and simply because Google Maps works better here on the African continent than say Apple Maps, or even, any of those other maps are just not very good here. We haven't got a very good mapping system. Maybe in the US is different, but here, our infrastructure is pretty broken. And this is the other thing I must tell you: people often forget that the world is not the same. A lot of these sort of quote unquote truthers make these blanket claims, and they're correct about digital ID and so on and so forth. But they think that everything is the same everywhere. It's not. If you come to the African continent, it's exceptionally broken and decentralized, and things don't work properly. So even if I am using Google Maps while I'm driving around, I can guarantee you that there's not much Google can do with it here on the African continent, other than the fact that they know where I'm moving around. You know what I mean? That's the only data that Google has of mine is literally that. I don't have anything else that's Googled. And I won't be able to find my destination in some cases if I don't use Google Maps. So there are concessions that one has to make. If you live in London, where everything works. I think it's a different setup. There you got a heavily surveilled country. I've been to Shanghai. I mean, I've never seen so many cameras in my life. I think there are something like 15 million cameras in Shanghai. Yeah, so I think it's an average of one camera for every two people. It's a huge amount of surveillance. Here, we have very few cameras, and where there are cameras, they've got bullet holes in them because people just shoot them. Because we can have guns here also. There's a very, very anti-state sentiment on the African continent. People are very suspicious of the government throughout sub-Saharan Africa. I mean, this is why the vaccine uptake was so low. They just didn't trust these white men in overalls coming to say, "Well, we want to inject you." And so there's culturally there's a very different sentiment down here. And so I think in some ways we can get away with Google apps here and there. Like I said, I just use Maps. I don't use Google for anything else. But if I were to use Linux, I'm not quite sure I would be able to get as much done as I currently do. Man, that is a long-winded answer.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I hear you, especially about the music recording and such. That is a problem for Linux. I don't deny those sorts of things.
But I'm not anti it. Just it's more about being pragmatic.
You hate Linux, is what I heard. And you're pro-China.
And I'm pro-China. And the thing is, Ubuntu was created by a South African who lived just up the road from me, Mark Shuttleworth.
So you hate South Africa?
I hate South Africa. Correct. Yes. I mean, he was given. He sold his company, I think, to a US company for something like, at that time, it was long ago already, 350 or 400 million US dollars. And he was working out of his garage, literally 20 minutes from my house. And then he created Ubuntu, which I thought at the time was one of the best versions of Linux that I'd ever used.
No, South Africa definitely has some great programmers. Craig Raw, Sparrow Wallet, Paul LaRue. Now, let me ask you about another tech question here. So you like to dig into things. Maybe share a little bit of your search techniques. Like, what kind of platforms are you using? Okay. Are you using AI? How do you get to the truth of things digitally?
I don't know what the truth is. That is part of the whole journey. But, well, at least I do know the truth, I think, in some things. But I don't even use Google search. All right. So I see my Apple Mac pretty much as just the machine that on which I install software that I need. Right. So I use Kagi.com, Kagi. Kagi.com. I think it's a Japanese word. I think it means freedom or something to that effect, or I don't know.
Is it Kagi or Kagi? Kagi?
I don't know, because I haven't heard anybody ever say it. But on their website they say it's pronounced. They say you pronounce it K as if you were going to say AHGI. So that AH sound, however you say it. In America, I suppose it's a different accent too.
So it's Kagi.com.
Yeah,
that's
.com, right? And it is a premium search engine. So I think you get almost just about no free searches per month. So it's pointless using it for free, but you can test it. I think because you have to pay about $10 a month or whatever, in my view, that makes it a better search engine than Brave or Yandex or Bing or Google or whatever. Like you really shouldn't be using Google. Some people use though, I forget what it's called now. It's like this Meta search engine that's free that sort of it brings together all the different search results into one page. I forget what that's called now. And some people use Start Page or whatever, but Start Page effectively just uses Google search, but with like a privacy shell around it or whatever. Why I like Kagi is that if you look at the guys behind it, they all really are interested in not being tracked and traced. So my searches on Kagi are not well. If we're going to get very sort of conspiratorial, we could say, they can actually track, but they claim that they don't trace and track any searches. Right? That's part of the premium package that you get with them. They have no idea what you're doing with it. They use a whole bunch of major search engines together to create their own search results, right? So they will use Google, and they will use Yandex, and they will use Brave, etc. One of the guys is from MIT, I think. So they've got some good brains behind them, but they're also quite intuitive. So there's obviously no advertising at all. What makes Cargi even better is that you can adjust your search results. So let's say you're searching for Jerm Warfare, and you get a whole bunch of other results. You can right click in the little icon or whatever on the side, and you can remove that result entirely from your search results. So, for example, if I search for, doesn't really matter, if I search for vaccines, right? If you search for vaccines on Google, you very, very unlikely going to get something that'll be a critique of vaccines. Everything will be in favor. It'll be CDC and FDA and the US government and Pfizer, etc. Right? Now, I don't want those search results because that's obviously been designed to be put in front of you. So on Cargi, you can readjust everything, and you can remove Wikipedia entirely, or you can put Wikipedia at the bottom. You can up rank, down rank, and you can entirely ban certain results. So I see nothing from CNN. I see nothing from Fox. I get absolutely nothing from any of the mainstream news feeds. And I've been using Cargi for about 2 years now. So I've been customizing my search results for quite a long time. I don't get anything from the FDA. I get nothing from the CDC. So if I search vaccines, nothing from the CDC comes up at all. They also have what they call a small web feature, where they basically can put everything that's on the other side of the internet first. So they will deliberately, if you want, you can turn it on, and it will basically search for the smallest, most independent, most fringe results and put that on the front page. So they can totally invert I don't know how they rank websites, but it's not the same as Google. And plus, as I said, they do use Google results mixed in with Yandex results and Bing, etc. So I think the way they do it is very, very intuitive. I would strongly recommend. They are incredibly small. I think they only have like 100,000 users or something, but they're not focused on competing because they're a premium model. So they're focused on the 100,000 people that they have who subscribe to them. So that's what matters to them. It's the quality of the results. They also can remove AI and all that. Now to answer your question about AI, they also have a AI assistant that you can turn on and turn off. So you don't have to use AI at all, but they basically give you, as part of the package, the AI assistant, which is essentially like ChatGPT or whatever, but it's their own one. You can select the model. So in the AI, so if I open my search assistant right now, I can select. Let's have a look here. I currently use their own one, but I can go to models. I can use Claude, Gemini. I can use Anthropic is Claude, DeepSeek, X, Grok, NVIDIA. Apparently, they've got their own one, Moonshot, Kimi or something. So there's a whole pile of these that you can choose from. So what I don't know how it works, but they obviously have the API or whatever. And so you can choose the ones that you want to use. Of course, it comes with differing results. So DeepSeek, if you want to search for anything to do with the Tiananmen Square thing that happened in Beijing, you're going to get nothing from DeepSeek because that's a Chinese AI. But you'll also get nothing from ChatGPT. I've tested it. Grok will
right, or if you ask ChatGPT how many sexes there are or genders, then you'll obviously get your own form of propaganda.
Yeah, exactly right. So you can choose the models that you want. I really get annoyed by the fact that they editorialize their LLMs, but I will say I find LLMs exponentially helpful because they, in my view, they're basically search engines on steroids. They can speed up searching the internet. I'm not afraid of AI, by the way. I'm not one of those Elon Musk types who sees it as an existential threat. I've done a few episodes on this where the guest basically has convinced me through, I think, very, very persuasive arguments that you're just dealing with algorithms. And as advanced as what they are, they're still algorithms. They don't have a will or a desire. The only time that you should worry is if you give up your own sovereignty to that. So you can always switch these things off. You've got the power to do that. You are in control of your own mind, so to speak. If you allow all of the stuff to come into your mind, that is on you. It's all about taking responsibility, because ultimately, if we keep shifting the blame, we'll never get anywhere. We need to be responsible for our own behavior. And if I don't want to use digital ID in any form, then I need to do my homework and find out where it's creeping in and resist that. And or CBDCs, or any other kind of sort of centralization. So LLMs for me are very, very helpful. I use them to help me research my guests and the topics and things, because if I do a daily show, Gabriel, I cannot possibly read everybody's books. A lot of my guests are authors, and there's no possible way I can read a book in a day. It's just not possible. And also in South Africa, it's not the easiest thing to get books. If I use Amazon, which I don't like using, Amazon is unfortunately the best carrier for physical books around the world. FedEx and DHL, etc., are very expensive, and so I then have to resort to PDFs and whatever. And I don't like reading on the screen. So then I have to wait a long time, between recordings. So there are a lot of practical reasons again why, in some respects, using LLMs. And I'm saying LLMs because AI, of course, is a very vast topic. And I'm saying that there are definitely good arguments to be made for some of them. And I know if some people are very anti AI, but I remember in the 1990s where people were anti-internet. We can't accept this. We must resist. This is the mark of the beast. I'll never forget people saying this was the mark of the beast coming into our lives. But you and I are talking right now over the internet. So,
right. The internet isn't a thing capable of potentially self-generation, going off in its own direction.
And I don't think AI is either.
Independent thought.
I don't think AI is either. I know that I'm giving a controversial view, because in the communities that you and I find ourselves, there is a lot of paranoia around AI. But I also think it comes down to defining what it actually is.
Sure.
Intelligence itself can't really be defined. Like, you can't actually, if I had to say to you, what is intelligence, we'll have a debate. We won't be able to give a succinct one-line answer. And if we don't really know what intelligence actually is, how can we even engineer it?
No, I agree. And by the way, Kagi, very interesting search engine. I made a note here. I've been talking with those guys. I need to get them on the show. Also, we're writing some articles on it. AI, I completely agree with your take. I do have hesitation, but we do a lot of teaching on AI. We have an entire course called AI Resistance, where we show you how it works, how to uncensor it, big part of this, all the different models, privacy concerns, how to self-host. So we have an entire course on that, very useful. And of course, what we say is that John Connor, if he were alive today, would be using a self-hosted AI to fight against Skynet.
Yes, exactly. The point that you're making is valid. Sorry, man, but I do get your emails, so I completely agree. Like, for example, I've got an AI loaded onto my computer that I use to help me with my actual episode transcripts, etc. And I use that quite a lot also. So it's literally. Have you heard of something called Whisper?
Yes.
Yeah, I use that. It's literally loaded onto my computer. It doesn't connect to anything.
Indeed, yes. And then you can get into all the agentic AIs and such, which have their own benefits. But I want to make sure that we cover this topic because this is fascinating.
Yeah.
You recently had a trip to China, and I wonder if you could. This is something I want to talk about in length. So there's a number of things that I'll just set up a number of themes, and then you can tell your story. We have the myth of China versus the reality. We have individualism and collectivism. We have freedom versus security.
Mm-hmm.
These are some themes I'm sure you'll hit as you give your impression. But maybe just tell your story of China and especially some of the takeaways about those particular topics.
Yeah. So I've been under a lot of attacks over the last few months, and not just me, but UK Column also, because some of the guys at UK Column also have been to China recently. And
A lot of people want you to stop talking, but surprisingly, it's not the CCP that's doing that.
No, exactly right. Oh, by the way, CPC, that's the virtue signal. So if somebody, I'll just quickly give you a tip. CCP is not the term that the Chinese government gave itself. That's a Western term. The Chinese Communist Party, CCP. That's a term that was coined in the West. The official term is the Communist Party of China, CPC. That's the name given by the Chinese government to itself. So when people talk about the Chinese government and they say CPC, that's a signal that they know what they already have a slight edge on their knowledge on on China. I just thought I'd throw that at you. It doesn't mean anything different. It's the same thing, but it's just how you're framing it. So it obviously was a paid trip because I was part of a documentary team, and some people get very upset about the fact that if it's paid trip, oh, that means that you are a shill and a grifter. No, I mean lots of people go on paid trips, and if I was offered a paid trip to Moscow, I'd totally go. If I was offered a paid trip to Iran, I would go. I don't have that kind of money. It's very, very expensive to go to those places.
Wait, so who paid for it in this case, though?
Well, it was part of a UK. There were multiple groups involved, and UK Column was one of them. And my participation was basically just to create some video content for UK Column because I knew some of the guys going to do this documentary, which has now been heavily delayed because of rights in the US as well as rights in China. It's complicated, and I'm not part of that process. That's not anything to do with the content. It's just to do with distribution. Anyway, I was part of the team, but my whole shtick was basically just to see for myself what China kind of looks like. We were there for almost a month and traveled about 9 cities. I've been to about 10 cities in China, and it was very, very vast in terms of the distance that we covered, from Shanghai, which is on the east, to all the way to Kashgar, which is on the west, which is basically on the border of Pakistan and Afghanistan. And that is where the original Silk Road was, and now the Belt and Road Initiative is pretty much the hub is there. At least it's in that province of Xinjiang. And the documentary is actually about the Silk Road becoming the Belt and Road Initiative. It's a very beautiful story, actually, if anybody cares about the history of China. And it's very interesting because a lot of the Opium Wars and all the, there's a lot of history that's gone on there that people should maybe look into. It's just very, very interesting. And I've wanted to go there for a long time because when I was at TNT Radio, I remember thinking, Gabriel, that if I'm questioning everything that I think I know about everything, right? Because the whole COVID era forced me to rethink what I thought about everything. And by the way, that includes even vaccines. If you had asked me in 2019, and I didn't have a child in 2019, but if you had asked me if I had a child, would he be vaccinated? I would say absolutely. My child was born 2 years ago, and he's not vaccinated, right? And my next child is arriving later this year, another boy, also will not be vaccinated. This was because I started questioning everything I thought I knew about pretty much everything. And I remember thinking when I was at TNT Radio, well, if I'm questioning everything, why am I constantly repeating the same tropes about China? I've never been there. Yet everything that I think I know is coming from Western media. And so when the opportunity arose for me to go there, nobody said to me at all, "Oh, you must say this." There are articles that have been written about me going. David Hughes, for example, wrote a four-piece series on me on his Substack, making all sorts of weird, not accusations, but kind of asking questions about my motives. And the only reason why he did that is because I came back with a fairly positive outlook on China. And how dare you, Gabriel? How dare you say something nice? So if you come to South Africa and you go back to your home and you say some nice things about South Africa, you obviously are a shill, right? You must only say bad things about this country. And that's the problem. I came back with a fairly nuanced approach to China, and I'm going to get to those nuances in a moment. I'm just creating the context, the picture. And I thoroughly enjoyed traveling with the team. I might appear in the documentary, but only in the background. I wasn't an active participant in the documentary. I was just sort of making vlogs, as it were, for UK Column. I hate that word vlog, but I was essentially doing that. And now I can tell you that we are dealing with a country that is very surveilled. Cameras everywhere you go. I think about 15 million cameras in Shanghai. But here's the thing. You have to be there to kind of understand what I'm about to tell you. The cameras didn't bother me that much. Yet if I go to London has also got millions of cameras. Those cameras will bother me. And I think the reason for that is because there's almost no crime in China, right? They have an exceptionally low crime rate. In Shanghai, you can walk anywhere you want at any time of the day or night.
Right.
This is important. This is very, very important because this is something that my critics do not understand. And every single one of my critics comes from a first world country with a fairly safe society.
It reminds me of Bukele in El Salvador. He gave this speech where he says that, if it's not safe to go and walk outside, you can't go to your library, you can't do anything. How is that freedom?
Well, this is the thing, and this is why I have a very complicated relationship now with China's cameras. I'm not saying I like them, and I have no intention of moving there or living there because people always go, well, if you like it, why don't you move there? No, I like where I live, right? I live in South Africa. I have a very decentralized, broken country. I have roads that are full of potholes and that we have a train network that doesn't work. It's very dangerous. It's not recommended that anybody uses South Africa's trains. Our buses are 50 years old and half of them are broken also. We have to be very self-reliant in South Africa. We have to have our own vehicles and we have to have our own guns and we have to have security around our homes. I live, and I'm going to explain to you why I'm telling you this. We live on a farm, but we have a lot of security. We have electric fencing. We have security guards who walk around at night all the time, every night. We have infrared systems to detect people walking who are not supposed to be walking here. This is just normal life in South Africa. All you have to do is go onto the internet, Cargi, don't use Google, and do image searches for, let's say, Johannesburg, and just look at the suburbs, look at how people live. Right? This is not how a free society should be living. You shouldn't have barbed wire around your house. You shouldn't have to be learning self-defense. Or my wife cannot drive alone at night. My wife can't even drive to the airport during the day because the Cape Town's airport is situated in a fairly unsafe area. So if she has to go to the airport, I take her. Now, I'm not trying to make you scared because if you live here, like I do, you get to know, you become streetwise, and I love my country and, well, I love where I live, put it that way, right? And I have no intention of moving. So we don't have a very surveilled system. So when I went to Shanghai and I saw this, it was very, very awkward and uncomfortable. Yet it didn't bother me. Why? Because the guy I was with, Carl, we, for example, were in a coffee shop. He left his cell phone charging against the side of the wall. We completely forgot about it and left and came back 2 hours later and it was still charging. Now that's unheard of here. Completely unheard of. Somebody would have taken it. I don't know how safe it is where you are. If you can leave a cell phone in your coffee shop for 2 hours and come back, and maybe you can. I don't know. But
somebody in South Africa may have taken the phone and then all of the copper wiring that was in the wall attached to it.
So what I'm getting at is what battles are you willing to concede? Because I did have a sense of freedom when I was there. The cameras didn't bother me, but I wasn't chaperoned. I could go wherever I wanted to at any time. There was no big screen on the side of a building with pictures of people who were jaywalking. We jaywalked all the time. I rode bicycles around Shanghai, and I literally, because everything's the other way around, I rode up the wrong side of the roads many times into oncoming traffic. And I had crossed over in the middle of the road, and it was chaotic. But nobody cared. I was led to believe that they will penalize you and your picture appears on the side of a building somewhere. None of this stuff. There's no social credit score there. Nothing that is any different to what the US or the UK has. In actual fact, I remember when I was in Sydney, in Australia, in the early 2000s, and we were driving on a highway, and my friend said to me, we have to drive slowly because we have a demerit system here. So if we go over the speed limit, we will lose a point, and we only get, I think, 15 points annually. And if we lose all of them, then we lose our license. Gabriel, that is a social credit score.
Right. Getting kicked off Facebook, Substack, all these American companies is also pretty bad censorship.
Yes, exactly. That's censorship. But I mean, actual a demerit, losing credit based on your behavior has been around for decades. And it's no different in China. I'm not saying it's great in China, but it's no different. In actual fact, I went through more red tape when I was in Europe in 2023 than in China. Getting my visa took me 2 days, which was fairly quick. Not even. Okay, getting my visa for entering Europe took, I think, almost a month and a half. They needed every document that I could offer them to prove that I was going to return and I wasn't going to stay there. They wanted evidence that I had no intention of staying in Europe. China didn't care. They just welcomed me. They obviously wanted to know a little bit about why I was there and where I was going, but that's part of, if I apply for a visa for the UK, it's the same thing. But there's no social credit score of any kind of totalitarian scale. Now, if we're talking about actual surveillance, though, do we ignore Palantir? Do we ignore everything that's going on in Western media or Western social media? How is that any different to cameras on the streets?
Well, there's a good meme, 2-panel cartoon where there's two people having a text back and forth saying how bad the surveillance is in China. And in the next panel, the FBI is reviewing their conversation live.
Exactly right. So China is probably on par, but I don't think it's ahead of the game. I would actually argue that there are Western countries that are far further ahead. And if you listen to a conversation I recently did with Cynthia Chung, who sounds Chinese, and that's because she is Chinese, but she's Canadian. And she was arguing social credit scoring is actually a Western invention. It comes from fintech, and it's an absolutely mind-blowing conversation. And it's not a Chinese invention, and it's not being led by the Chinese. Now, everything that I'm telling you makes me sound like I'm pro-China or I'm pro-CPC, CCP, I'm China maxing, all of these silly labels. But all I'm doing, Gabriel, is I'm trying to present a slightly more nuanced approach. I don't like 15 million cameras in a city. But like I said, I can't explain to you why, but it didn't really bother me. Maybe it's because I had no intention of stealing things. I did jaywalk. Nobody cared. I did lots of things wrong. I crossed when I wasn't supposed to cross, red lights, all kinds of stuff. No different to anywhere else. And I found that I could speak about things that I can't speak about, in sort of Western circles. Now, you choose your battles here. I can't criticize the government in China. So there are a couple of things I don't like. They don't like protest or any kind of revolution. So you don't get involved in sort of mass protests. Okay, that they don't like. And they don't like criticism of the government. But they also don't like saying nice things about the government. You just don't talk about the government. You act as though Xi Jinping doesn't exist. You don't say nice things, don't say negative things, just don't say anything. That's how they like it. It's this invisible entity. So that's kind of weird, right? So we'll criticize the government all the time. But you choose your battles, because there you can challenge certain World War II events that you can't challenge in Western countries, which I won't mention now. I don't want to get you flagged. But there are certain topics that will get you criminalized in over 20 countries. That doesn't happen there. So you can choose your battles here. What is it that you want to which hill do you want to die on? I cannot do what I do in China, so therefore I won't go there. But the Chinese people love what has happened in that country over the last 30 years. They love it. And you can understand it when you go there. There's no poverty, just about. Like, pretty much nothing. It's super safe. Everything is fast and effective and efficient. You can
easy enough to get a business up and going. Yeah, not too much red tape and restrictions and everything.
I met up with a friend. He's an economist, an American economist, and he's been living in China for 30 years now. And he speaks Mandarin fluently. He lives in Shanghai. I had supper with him. And his kid was born just a couple of years ago, and his wife's kid. And because he's American, the U.S. Embassy was asking that he gets a U.S. passport, applies for it. And he said, actually, no. He's giving his kid a Chinese passport. Now, so how it works is, in China, you can't have both, because America and
no
China
dual passports, or
no, particularly not between the US and China. They're not terribly good friends. So China doesn't want you to be Chinese and to have a US passport, and vice versa. So he said to the US Embassy, no go, my child is going to grow up Chinese. Why? He says, because I don't like Xi Jinping, but I prefer where China is going right now to where the US is going. He says there's a much better future here for my kid in China than in the US. Now, this is, I've never been to the US, so I can't comment. But he's an American who now lives and works in Shanghai, and he's an economist, so he also understands numbers and trends and where the I guess movement is heading. And it certainly does look like he's correct in that sense. I don't know. I would, Joe Rogan would not exist in China. Tucker Carlson wouldn't exist in China, because they don't like you to be any kind of famous person who has strong opinions on politics. But you can certainly be mega wealthy and be a pop singer or something. So would I live there? No, I would probably still choose. If I had to choose between the two, I'd possibly still choose the US based on that, because of what I do. But there are other things. When I arrived in Shanghai, Gabriel, I arrived in my hotel. It was about, 10:30 at night. And I connected to the internet. And there's the other thing, by the way. The internet there is quite tricky to use. You have to do your homework before you're entering China, because they firewall everything. I connected to WhatsApp, and I saw on the farm that we live, there are about maybe 40 homes. And in the WhatsApp group, they were talking about an explosion that happened in a gang area about 1 kilometer away from where we live. Now, I mean, if I look out my window now, I can see the area that's in question. There was an explosion that went off, and there was some sort of gang shootout. And so I immediately messaged my wife and I asked if she's okay and everything. And she said, no, it's fine. She didn't hear anything, but the neighbors were talking about it. But everything seems to be fine now. Now, you must understand, I'm halfway around the world. And I turn on my WhatsApp, and I see that there's been some chaos happening very close to where I live. That's unheard of in China. So, what comes first, Gabriel? Family or ideology? And what are you willing to concede? If family comes first. Are you willing to have more cameras in your city so that you can make sure that your wife doesn't get raped or your kid doesn't get shot? It's a very, very philosophical conundrum, but it is a real one because we're dealing with two extremes now. I'm from the African continent, and China is the polar opposite in terms of safety. I'm not saying I want more cameras, but I am saying that I can understand why some people would actually be okay with that if it means that their family is safe. Because to me, Gabriel, there's nothing more important than my family. I've got another kid on the way. I can't imagine them being killed. You know what I mean? So this is now where it becomes real. And these guys who write their Substack articles, they exist in a world of theory. They exist in a world of books. They don't know what reality is like outside of their bubble. And this is why I think it's very, very important to travel and to see places, because it gives you a deeper understanding. I'm not an expert on China, obviously not. But it certainly gives you, if you come to South Africa, it'll give you one step more in the direction of understanding South Africa than what you would have currently because you haven't been here. You know what I mean? So this is why there's a nuance. So do I want more cameras? As I'm sitting right here, no. But I don't like the idea of going to Shanghai and finding out that there was a bomb blast and a gang shootout just down the road from where my wife and kid are. You know what I mean? It's a very complex scenario, but it's a very real scenario. And I can tell you right now, ideology does not come before family for me.
Yeah, this is a very interesting take. Obviously, there's some other sorts of things when we compare China to other places that we should also factor in, rather than just like comparing the government political situations.
It's not binary. It's not binary. It's not 1 or 0. It's not a zero-sum game.
And I think that the people who are criticizing those who have something nice to say about China, instead of directing that energy at that, they should be, I think, directing their energy at the problems, in some cases worse problems that their own places have, and try to fix those. I think that would be a healthier way to go about it.
I mean, did I say anything to you now that sounded like I was promoting China or the Chinese government or China maxing?
You were basically saluting to the Communist Party is what I imagine you were doing.
Because what I'm saying to you is what I've been saying since I got back from China. And apparently that makes me a shill for the Chinese government. And it's so bizarre to me. It's so strange. I can't wrap my head around it. And I wish that some of these critics would maybe just come and spend 2 weeks in South Africa, come to Johannesburg, and then very, very quickly leave Johannesburg and come down to Cape Town. But then understand why something like crime and safety. Before I was married, 2 of my ex-girlfriends, Gabriel, were raped. Right, both of them, at separate times, obviously. The one was gang raped, and the other was not gang raped. Now, that's not something that we should be talking about. It's not even something that should be a reality. But that's reality. That is real. It's not theory. It's not a book that someone's reading and writing about. It's not technocracy. Yes, technocracy is a terrible thing, and we absolutely should be opposing it. And hopefully we are in various ways. But that doesn't mean at the same time we must suddenly ignore what life is like somewhere else, you know? Because if you go to one of those girls that I dated who was raped and you ask her what matters, I think her response will be very different to someone on Substack. And that's where the complexity comes in. Thank you so much, Gabriel. Really appreciate it. Did you want me to give final thoughts, or did you say those are the final thoughts?
So then, Jeremy, just to wind down the discussion of China, we talked about some of the, maybe a couple of the negatives, some of the nuance. What was the experience, though, of traveling in China? Like, what were some of the benefits of the way that the Chinese do things? Like, what was some of the convenience that you experienced?
You're setting me up now. Gabriel.
I'm setting you up 100%. Be careful what you say.
Yes, you're setting me up. Okay, so convenience. I don't recall seeing any physical money when I was there at all. Nothing. I didn't see a coin. I didn't see a cash note. If you ask me what Chinese currency looks like, I can't answer that. Everything was done via Alipay and WeChat. So those are their kind of catch-all apps that do everything. And when I say do everything, I mean do everything. You can pay for parking. You can tip a busker on the side of the road, or wherever you see buskers, you don't see them on the side of the road, but you know what I mean. Yeah, you can do anything. You buy your metro tickets, buy food, the works. Now, that's what Elon, I believe, wants to do with X, the sort of everything app. I'm not entirely convinced that convenience is always a good thing, Gabriel. I think we should sometimes embrace inconvenience. Depends on what battle we want to fight. If everything is convenient, then we risk becoming caged in, into that sort of digital control grid. So I think we must always be aware of these things. Now, using WeChat and Alipay in China didn't bother me too much, mainly because I don't live there. So I only set it up to go there and then, disconnected my card when I left China. And that's that. I don't use WeChat. Well, actually, I'm lying. I still use WeChat to chat to friends in China, but that's that. They can't talk to me on WhatsApp because of the Great Firewall, which, by the way, is an interesting topic on its own. I have a somewhat nuanced view on that, which I actually think I might want to bring up, because a lot of people just see it as brute censorship, and I think there's a little bit of misdirection happening there.
Why don't you?
Yeah,
feel free to talk about that if you want.
Well, sure. Okay. Well, let me just quickly finish my last train of thought. Speaking of train, by the way, when I was at the Chengdu airport, which is an incredible airport, by the way, if you want to see what it looks like, just type in Chengdu airport, Chengdu, Chengdu, and have a look at an aerial view. It's almost a piece of art. It is incredible.
Oh wow, yeah, that looks pretty crazy.
Yeah. So I was inside that airport, and I took a train because they got these trains inside the airport, and they don't call it a train. They call it an automated people mover, which I think is pretty funny because that's literally what it is. It's automated and it moves people. So you can't fault them on being literal. But just to answer your question, I really did enjoy the culture. I enjoyed the hospitality. Chinese people are, just culturally down to earth. It's an incredible civilization. It's 5,000 years old, more or less. It's a lot older than most other civilizations around the world. And I think we don't appreciate the impact that they've had on us today. We just see them as basically the last 100 years. And that's as far back as our sort of shallow history goes. But they are an ancient civilization, and they have an incredible history. The Silk Road is incredible, and how the British tried to take over using drugs, the Opium Wars. And of course, the whole century of embarrassment where they decided to copy Soviet communism, and then they decided to change it. And the whole sort of recent history of China is also pretty interesting. And it's an incredibly pragmatic society. They are very, very practical. Everything is efficient, and they're very kind, and everybody looks after everybody else. So just on a day-to-day level, a very, very beautiful people. Now, I wouldn't want to live there. I said that I love living in the chaos of Africa. I prefer the sense of freedom that I get from our deconstructed, broken system that we have on the African continent. It's very difficult for oligarchs and central authorities to win here because nothing really works. And so we are forced to become self-reliant. We're forced to take matters into our own hands. We're forced to look after ourselves and to make things work. You have to be an entrepreneur in Africa if you want to get anywhere. You can't sit back and take welfare, like the Canadians do or the British do. I don't know what it's like in the US, but here it's a bit of a welfare state, but the welfare that you get is peanuts. You're not really going to do anything other than survive. So if you want to do more than survive, you've got to think out of the box, and you have to build communities. So a lot of the stuff that we talk about, during the COVID era, the things like growing your own food and building networks and all that kind of stuff, we do that by default. Yeah, in South Africa, and I think across the greater sub-Saharan Africa. So just culturally, by virtue of the fact that we have a remarkably, what's the term that Trump used? Shithole. It is like that. It's you have to take the good and the bad. So if you want everything working and you want convenience and you want high speed, safety, everything, well, China is that. You want the exact opposite. It's what we have here on the African continent, and I still prefer it. Now, going back to your question about the firewall. So this is, I'm trying to think how to even begin to answer the question. All right. So the way in which you think, Gabriel, is already right off the bat within the framework of Western thinking. Okay. So I'm not saying that as a criticism. It's just where you are in the world. I have some degree of Western thinking. I'm not entirely certain if African countries can be considered Western. I think because of colonialism, etc., European, infrastructure here, you could probably argue that we have a degree of Westernization here and then a degree of Africanization. So I suppose we've got a little bit of everything here, just because of our history. Now, why I'm saying that is because everything that we see is not from a Chinese perspective. It's not from an Asian perspective. Our frameworks are entirely different. So, in other words, they see the West as, in many ways, the enemy. Right? They see the NATO bloc, the Western bloc, as a series of countries and governments and sort of attempts to bring their way into Chinese culture, right? And they have worked very hard at trying to remain sovereign. Now, by keeping the internet completely open and free, they see this as an attack on their sovereignty, because what will happen is that you can have uprisings, you can have revolutions, and you can have basically Western degenerate culture coming into China. And I think everywhere you see an example of this, and I'm trying to speak from their perspective here to some degree, they see this as an implosion of cultural values, of sovereignty, of everything, right? They just see the Westernization of their country being a bad thing. So they also believe strongly in protecting their 1.5 billion people. And in many ways, they don't need to access anything outside of China, because 1.5 billion people is almost what? One sixth of the entire world's population. It's a whole universe on its own. Completely self-sustaining infrastructure, if that makes sense. I mean, tourism, when they talk about tourists, they aren't talking about people outside of China. They're talking about people from other provinces in China. I'm a foreigner, but when they talk about, just a tourist, they're talking about another Chinese person. So their framework is quite different. Now, I don't personally like the idea of blocking access to the worldwide internet, but you have to understand, from when I was there, I was chatting to them. They can access the outside world, by the way. It's just that officially there's a firewall on a lot of websites, and the websites that get blocked are the ones that tend to be aligned with Western propaganda. So they don't want to access CNN or Fox or even Wikipedia, because all of those are propaganda mouthpieces with a Western perspective. I don't know if I'm making sense.
No, you're making a lot of sense. I think I'll explain this maybe in a way that makes sense to me. So I used to play tennis with a Chinese guy, and we had this exact butting of heads over this sort of thing, because I would talk to him about China, and I would immediately bring up things like, "Oh yeah, but you can't criticize the government," and he found that a little bit confusing. He's like, "Well, yeah, but why would you want to, basically?" And for me, it was like that's the only thing and first thing I wanted to do. And as I thought about it a little bit more, I was like, well, you have the end result, and then you have how you get there. The end result of China right now, people seem to have a good bit of freedom besides some of those kind of main key freedoms. They seem to have a pretty functional place. They seem to be able to do business pretty easily and simply. They don't have a lot of the cultural degeneracy, which cannot be underestimated. And so if you ask yourself, like, would you prefer to live in that environment versus to live in, let's say, Seattle or something like this, it becomes a more interesting question,
Yes.
because there's always trade-offs, there's always consequences. But then in the end, also, like the Chinese wouldn't want me there. They're doing their own thing. They're going about it their own way. So I
Yes.
really don't have to think myself about if China's doing things correctly. They're doing it their way. And sure, it's fun to think, would I want that in my area? Probably not. But there's some interesting things to consider when you do think about the more of the heavy hand approach, which can, we like to talk about decentralization, this and that, but the heavy handed approach can absolutely create, by definition, not 100% freedom, but a pretty good amount of freedom, right? Like
Yes.
Bukele in El Salvador, says that what freedom do you have if you go outside and you can't even walk around? It's so unsafe. That's not freedom at all. So that's how I see it. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense, and it's a whole lot more eloquent than what I was saying. By the way, I want to just also thank you, just while we're in the middle of this conversation, for having me on. I generally interview people. I don't do the interviews, so I'm not actually very good with speaking. I prefer my guest speaking, and I prefer drawing pictures, if that makes sense. So,
No,
please bear
you're
with me
doing
when I.
great. No, you're fine. You're fine. So then let's just finish up with the
Mm.
firewall. So
So basically, what they're doing. Let me. So I think I've got it. What they're trying to do is put sovereignty first, and the state sees itself as the arbiter of the Chinese civilization, right? So the state is the state is the state. They don't put any kind of religion up front, because that would mean that the state takes second place. The state is the most important thing in China, and you can be religious, but you cannot be Billy Graham, because that's leading to revolution. That's leading to immense popularity that can put you above the president, if that makes sense. So they're kind of an atheist state, but they allow you to practice your beliefs. They allow you to do whatever you want, but you can never be a threat to the state. And the internet, in all of its entirety, including pornography and the dark web, etc., they see as a potential threat to the sovereignty of the state. And they do not want Chinese sovereignty to be compromised. Now, you can access the outside world, as it were. And when I was in Shanghai, I did. You can use a VPN. And obviously they have to, because they don't only do business within China, they do business outside of China. So it's well known that they can access the outside world, but officially the state likes to have this firewall, and they like to promote the firewall to show that they are protecting the sovereignty of the Chinese culture, heritage, customs, traditions, etc. Now, you can take that whichever way you want. You can see that as oppression or suppression of speech, all kinds of things, and you'll probably have a valid point. But if you go and ask the Chinese themselves what they think, and this is where that framework aspect comes in, you, as somebody who lives in the States, or me as somebody who lives on the African continent, we don't have to worry about these frameworks because we don't live there. They're the ones who see their economy rocketing right now. They see everything going really well for their country. So they see all of this as a good thing. And that's where the frameworks come in.
Right. And my understanding is that they're also adapting a little bit of Western values in terms of starting to be critical of power and maybe even some healthy things as well. It's not just so, they're totalitarian and everybody accepts that. I doubt it's even that, of course. Let's move on to South Africa though, since you brought it up, just as a comparison, because this is a place that you live. There's lots of stereotypes of South Africa. Obviously, in such a place, you can carve out your own community. There's plenty of parallel societies springing up down there. You seem to like it well enough, as you've said, and maybe just talk a little bit about what it's like living in South Africa, how you make it work, and how much you enjoy the things that it has to offer.
Well, let me start off by saying that if you decide to visit, my home is open to you, and we will have a great time. I'll show you around.
Especially if you're a Chinese official.
And we'll drive around in my Chinese car. Actually, I'm not joking. I've got a Chinese car. I sold my German car. Because it was a whole lot cheaper and it came with more tech.
Yeah, that's interesting. I haven't seen any Chinese cars in Europe or North America at this point, but yeah.
I think that's understandable though, because of all the politics.
It's not in the Belt and Road either.
Yeah, exactly. Now, as I'm talking to you right now, so I'm in my studio, but because this is audio, I've opened all my curtains so that it's not dark in here, and I'm looking outside, and the blue sky, and I live on a farm, so right in front of my house, I have grapes, lots and lots of vineyards, beautiful community around me. On this farm, maybe about 40 houses. And we all know one another. We've got a WhatsApp group, and we have lots of things that we do together, whether it's Christmas, or what do we call this? Like they'll have a band that'll come and play on the farm, and then we'll all go down and sit on the big patch of grass, which is at the bottom of the farm. And we'll do red wine and pizzas and listen to the guys do Christmas songs. Or a few weeks ago, we had we call it a braai. What do you call it? A barbecue. So we don't use the word barbecue, by the way. In South Africa, we have a very bastardized version of English. Because Afrikaans is spoken more in South Africa than English, a lot of our words have been borrowed from Afrikaans, and then we've adopted them into English. So we've actually got an Oxford dictionary just for South Africa, because we have so many words that we use that are not English words. So we don't use the word barbecue at all. So I always have to think quickly, what is the translation? So we use the word braai, B-R-A-A-I. It's an Afrikaans word that means barbecue. And here on the farm, we'll sometimes have a barbecue just in the street, and everybody brings their camping chairs and their drinks. It's very, very nice vibe. My wife grows vegetables around our house, grows too many, in fact, and shares them with the people on the farm. When I say farm, though, I don't mean rustic. It is a beautiful farm. It's been here since the 1700s, so it's very, very, very pretty and well looked after, and the houses are very sort of modern and all that. And I'm on the outskirts of Cape Town, right at the bottom of Africa, and we have, I think, probably one of the better cities in the country. I wouldn't say it's a huge city by any kind of international standard, but it's the second largest city in South Africa. I think our population is around 6 million. Johannesburg, which is the largest, I think has a population of around 9 or 10 million. So these are the two big cities in South Africa. And life here is I think is great. If you're a foreigner, you'll often get warnings. I was on the UK government's website, and they were talking about British visitors to South Africa, and they give all of these warnings. There's a long list of warnings what you must be careful of when you land in South Africa, and all these sorts of things that are second nature to us. But the reality is that this is Africa, and it does come with its own set of pros and cons. As I said earlier, there's a lot of chaos. So it's a very violent country, but the violence is not equally spread out. It's usually very concentrated in certain areas. I suppose a similar way of looking at it is, I guess maybe Detroit could be seen as like a high crime area, and I don't know what would be a safe area than in the US, and you can compare those, and you'll have a different breakdown of concentration. However, the politically correct way of looking at these things is that everything is equally distributed, so it's the same. The risks are the same everywhere you go, but that's simply not true. So where I live is generally much safer than other parts of the city, and you have to be streetwise in South Africa, Gabriel. You can't come here thinking that you can just walk alone at night in the middle of the city. That's very stupid. You probably won't make it to the morning with all your belongings. If you do decide to just randomly walk in the middle of the city at night, it's quite dangerous. And if you do that, you have to know what you're doing. We do have guns here in South Africa. So much like in the US, we can carry guns. I, for example, have guns, and I think it's generally a good thing to be armed and to protect against any unwanted activity. But of course, because we live in a very violent society here, knowing some form of self-defense is generally a good thing. Here on the farm, we have quite a lot of security. We've got electric fencing around the outskirts of the farm. We've got a thick layer of trees just on the outside to make it harder to get to the fencing. We have security that walks around constantly, right through the night. Of course, when you have geese and dogs, those are also very good deterrents. And that is kind of how you learn to live in South Africa. We have many, many gated communities. It's a common thing. I don't know if you have them where you are, but it's basically, like an estate, where everybody lives behind, like a little village, and often with boom gates and that kind of stuff. That is a very common occurrence right across South Africa. And the reason why we have that is for safety. I don't know why we have a violent country, and this is something that a lot of people have been trying to figure out. So during apartheid, it was much safer for all South Africans, including black people. Despite the fact that black people were oppressed by the government, it was still safer because of the sort of high police military presence, I suppose. But why South Africa has become so crime-ridden is, I think, and this is just a working theory, I don't have any evidence, but I think that we have foreign-backed interests keeping our country destabilized, particularly across the mining and agricultural sectors, because those are the hearts of our economy. And it would make sense because we see this happening across Africa. Africa has got a history of foreign interest. I think everybody knows this. I think there are about 13 countries that still use the French currency, by the way. They still have to answer to Paris, which in itself is a bizarre concept. Angola, Malawi, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Rwanda, Uganda, Congo, all of these countries have got huge amounts of foreign infiltration, and largely because of all the minerals. And South Africa has a very, very historical presence, shall we say, of minerals. We have platinum, gold, and silver, lots and lots and lots of it. In 1994, when apartheid ended and quote unquote democracy came in, over 50% of our entire private sector was controlled by one company, Anglo American. That's a mining company. Just think about that for a second. Over 50% of our entire private sector was controlled by one company, and it had to do with mining. I mean, that's an incredible piece of history that a lot of people don't know. And right now, all of our mines are foreign owned. We don't have any South African owned mines. So I think that a lot of instability is by design. And I can't quite figure out how that leads to, violence on a day-to-day basis. But I think there must be a connection, and I think that answer might become clearer in the future. But I mean, if you've got a working theory to add to that, I'd be happy to know. But I can't for the life of me understand why we are so violent. I mean, we aren't as poor as our neighboring countries. I think we are the wealthiest of all African countries. All of our neighbors, are much, much poorer than what we are. And their crime is not nearly as bad as ours, not nearly as violent. And when I talk about violent crime, I mean proper violence, Gabriel. If you do a quick internet
like
search,
misgendering somebody.
Words of violence. Did you not know?
Oh, I'm quite aware. Yes. Or worse than that, because it's hard to imagine, worse than that.
But if you do a quick internet search for South African farm attacks, I think there's an entire Wikipedia page on it. For example, it has its own page.
Yeah, we've had AfriForum on the show. They've spelled out quite a bit of that. So yeah, I don't.
Oh, okay. So you know them. I know them quite well. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, those images live rent free in my head for sure.
Yeah. So that right there, I think, is mostly foreign backed. It's a destabilization attempt. Because what's going on there is beyond normal human decency. The one wife of the farmer was tied to a chair. They drilled into her hands. They gassed her with a flame. It's unbelievable kind of stuff. It's barbaric. It goes back to the dark ages kind of thing.
So is the theory here that there are forces destabilizing South Africa so that they can retain control over the trillions of dollars of mineral wealth? That's the idea?
That's my working theory, correct. And our third largest political party, called the EFF, it's run by a guy called Julius Malema. He's basically a one-trick pony. His entire campaign is against white people and farmers. And he just wants all of the farms destroyed and taken away. Now, I can't understand why any person would want that other than being foreign backed. And he did say on Twitter a number of years ago that one of their biggest funders was quote unquote the Jews. Now, historically, Israel has also been behind a lot of all, shall we say, Israeli intel. I'm not going to say all Jews or all Israelis, but we know that Israeli intel has been behind a lot of bad stuff, and I don't see why we would be any different. But nonetheless, by the way, and that tweet that I mentioned is still on Twitter. It's still on his profile, so I'm not making it up. Nonetheless, I still don't know exactly what's going on, but I have a working theory that we have foreign forces that are very invested in keeping everything destabilized, and by constantly propping up violence and instigating violence and bringing white versus black the whole time, because that's a big thing, racial tension. But I don't think, Gabriel, that racial tension is a real thing. I live here, and we go away all the time, and we engage all the time with people, different cultures, different ethnicities, and nobody wants to kill anybody else. The only tension that we get is when it comes from the top down. Does that make sense?
I'm following you.
When it's triggered, when it's been imposed, the mainstream media has a way of perpetuating and making something much bigger than what it is. And then by doing that, you friends, like, you're chumming the water, you're throwing in horse meat, and then you're getting the sharks to come and circle. But if you don't chum the water, the sharks just do their own thing. They're not necessarily safe, but they're doing their own thing. And if you leave them be, they're fine. And you can even swim with the sharks, as it were. And they won't necessarily come and kill you. But the moment that you try and stir up that sort of frenzied attack mode, then there seems to be this kind of groupthink that goes on. And I think that this is being exploited by foreign interests. Anyway, as I said, I have nothing to back that up. It's my working theory, but I do see this happening in the Kruger National Park, which is one of my favorite places in the world. It's our very, very big game park, for those who don't know. It's right at the top right of the country, and it's been there since about 1920-ish. It's over 100 years old. And it's massive. All right. It's an international game park. It's the size of Israel. It's so big that you can fly from any country and land inside the park. The park has got its own airport. Now, I'm not a fan of that. I don't like the idea that you're flying into a game park with a commercial plane, just because it's noisy and it disrupts the nature. But nonetheless, it is what it is, and you can do that. So it's a really, really, really beautiful game park. We try and go there every single year. For us, it's one hell of a road trip because it's on the other side of the country. For us, it's about 2,500 kilometers one way.
Nothing.
I don't know what that is in miles.
That's chump change. That's easy. One day.
Oh, okay.
2 days,
no. Actually.
2 days. So, well, look,
yeah.
This is interesting. Let me ask you about South Africa and how comfortable you feel talking about the controversial stuff you talk about on your show. What is it like just day-to-day dealing with the government of South Africa? Do you feel comfortable saying what you want? Talk about some of those details, maybe.
Yeah. Well, sorry. The reason why I was mentioning Kruger, and I'll quickly come back to your question, is that rhino horn poaching is a big deal, right? I mean, this is something that gets buried in all the sort of geopolitics of the world, but this is a big deal. I mean, we have thousands of rhinos constantly being poached, and it's a grotesque thing. And you can look it up on the internet, and it's a pretty devastating, but very lucrative industry. And it's completely foreign controlled. This is not local. It's not organic. It's not domestic. Every part of the whole sort of chain of events is international. These are syndicates. This is like drug smuggling kind of stuff. There's big money in it. And there's a lot of violence. If you watch a movie like Blood Diamond with Leonardo DiCaprio, okay, it's just a fictional movie, but it is kind of based on real events. Now, that gives you an idea of the kind of sort of shadowy operations that go on the continent. Rhino horn is no different. It's very, very, very dodgy. It's dark. A lot of people involved. And the locals who are involved already they're just pawns. And so the guys in the park who live there, the rangers, whose job it is to try and protect those rhinos, they're only dealing with the plebs, because the syndicates are very, very powerful. And CITES, which is basically part of the UN, have made it worse. I think that they are complicit. But nonetheless, so why I brought that up is just simply because we have examples of foreign interest purposefully exploiting, and I think other aspects of our society are no different. Going back to your question about day-to-day life dealing with the government, we can say whatever we want pretty much. The government is completely inept. They are very useless, very corrupt. There isn't one government on the African continent that is not corrupt. They're all profoundly wealthy and corrupt. as a result, they don't really care what we say. I think in South Africa, there are only really two things that you can't do when it comes to freedom of expression. You can't fly the old South African flag. That is considered hate speech and can get you either heavily fined or even imprisoned. But there are conditions under which you can fly the old South African flag, like, for example, theatrical performance or art or something like that. But you can't just have it in your garden. You can't fly the old flag in your garden of your house, for example, or have it on your wall or something. And you can't say now because I might have South Africans listening to this. I'm not going to actually get myself into trouble, but there's a word that we cannot say, a derogatory word for black people. And although I hate self-censorship, I don't want to get myself targeted either.
Let's say kill the Boers instead. Would that be safer?
That you can say, by the way. Isn't that ironic?
I think it makes perfect sense. But
Yes.
yeah, I mean it's just the reality.
But yeah, so basically so those are the only two things that will get you into trouble in South Africa.
Holocaust denial, is that okay?
Yes. Yeah. It's not encouraged. I don't think that's encouraged anywhere. I personally think that we should be able to talk about anything, no matter
On Twitter,
what.
it's definitely encouraged.
But in South Africa, I mean, you have the Jewish lobbies, and you have sort of very liberal organizations who will take offense to that kind of stuff, and they'll probably make your life difficult, and you'll get into the media or whatever. I lost one of my cartooning gigs. I was drawing for a wonderful organization, I think back in 2020. And that was kind of when I was starting my podcast. I started in 2019. And I had Norman Finkelstein scheduled to come onto my show. Now, Norman Finkelstein is a Jewish historian who wrote a book called The Holocaust Industry. And he lost most of his family on his mother's side and his father's side in the camps. But he's a little bit slow to refer to it as death camps or concentration camps. And as I said, he calls it an industry. He was banned from entering Israel. You can look him up online. There's lots of interviews with him on YouTube. And I made the mistake of announcing ahead of time that he was coming onto my show, and I then lost my cartooning job because of the term Holocaust denial. So it can affect you, but it's not against the law, if that makes sense. Same as vaccines. So vaccines,
right,
here are not so in South Africa, there's not a single mandate for any vaccine, right? So you don't have to vaccinate your child or yourself or nobody is legally obliged to be vaccinated for any reason in South Africa, right? However, if you go take your kid to a school or something, the school might give you a hard time. They'll find a reason that your kid can't enter that school or whatever. So what I'm saying is that it's not against the law, but they can make your life difficult.
Yeah. Let me get this in, because this is a topic you cover a lot. Alternative health practices, questioning the status quo of institutionalized medicine. This is one of your main themes on the show, on your show, Jerm Warfare. What are some main ideas, main takeaways that you've maybe implemented into your life, the changes that you've made?
I love this question. So for me, health is probably my favorite topic of all topics. But it's not, I don't know, for some reason, Gabriel, people don't really care about health. It's weird.
It's not very sexy.
No, it's not sexy. Let's rather talk about technocracy and
right.
CBDCs
and how doomed we are. Yeah. Not solutions, but
no. So I'm a big there we go. Yeah, you've just touched on it. So like health is a solutions orientated topic, and I love solutions. I get so depressed at the black-pilled nature of the alternative independent media space. There's so much doom and gloom and so much nihilism. There's nothing we can do. They're spraying us from the skies. Let's all sit back and die. This is basically it. Oh, but we must still fight. But what must you fight if it's all over? And for me, health is this is the starting point of everything. And I mean it, the starting point. My kid was born 2 years ago. He came into the world, and the very first thing that I said, because unfortunately, my wife tried to have a home birth, and things got a bit complicated, and the cord got wrapped around his neck, and his heartbeat was dropping. So there was a legitimate reason to end up in the hospital. By the way, that's also something that I'm very passionate about, is understanding pregnancy and bringing kids into the world and all that kind of thing, because that is a topic that most people just don't know. And understandably so. I mean, before I had kids, it wasn't something that I thought about. But it's like literally the starting point of our lives. It's where, we came into the world, and what did our parents do? And that matters quite a lot, because that can affect us later on in life. And I remember in the hospital, and I said to the doctor right there, I said, the moment he comes out, he must please go straight to my wife, right? She needs to hold him. He doesn't get any injections, and I don't even want him to have vitamin K. And most people don't even know what vitamin K is, by the way. This is why I find health so fascinating. In a bunch of states in the US, you cannot say no to vitamin K. Most people don't know this. It's an absolutely fascinating topic. Like, if it was nothing, why is it mandated in a whole bunch of states in the US? And I think they're trying to do it now across Europe also. Anyway, it's basically a blood thickener. The long and the short of it is, the narrative is that babies are born with too little blood that's too thin, and so they need to be either injected or get given drops in the tongue of vitamin K to thicken the blood. Imagine this, Gabriel. For thousands of years, babies have been born apparently deficient in this one thing. And so now the pharmaceutical industry is telling us, no, we need to rectify that. But there's a reason why babies are born that way. But anyway, that's now a topic for a different day. And our boy is super healthy, right? He doesn't even have a pediatrician, a doctor of his own. I think he went for the first time 2 weeks ago because he fell on his face off the couch onto the concrete floor and cut his lip, and then he had this little sort of abscess. For me, health is really important because it's where we start. And so where my kid starts his life is going to impact the rest of his life from those injections. I don't think that any vaccine is necessary. And then after that, it goes down to diet, eating the right things, not eating stuff that comes out of a box. The fewer ingredients, the better. I generally favor a diet that's more ketogenic, but that's also quite a fashionable term. What I'm really saying is keep your sugar intake low. This is what I've come to realize on my podcast from talking to people from around the world, that the general trend is to keep your sugar intake low ultimately. Why? Because cancer, for example, feeds off sugar. And so we start seeing all the links now to the web. We see the sort of standard typical American diet, I think, is very, very unhealthy. I won't say that the South African standard diet is much healthier because we have a lot of obesity. But that's another thing. Where do all these fat people come from? What's going on? And a lot of it has to do with just simply eating too much sugar and too much food that is refined. If it's in a box or if it's in a tin or something, generally try and avoid it. Go for stuff that's whole foods, that's wholesome, it's healthy, it's fresh. We try and support local farmers. This is another talking point on my podcast, is supporting local industry. Don't necessarily always buy from the chain stores unless it's stuff that you can't get locally. I go hunting. I bring the meat home. I don't go hunting that often because hunting season's only a few times a year in a window period. And hunting can get expensive, and there's a lot of meat. But that kind of the idea is that it's free range, it's grass fed. Try and get away from too many chemicals and pesticides and that kind of stuff. So you can kind of see now when I'm talking about health, it's not just about what you eat. It expands and it goes into light. That for me is also fascinating. The sunlight. Like, why do we wear sunglasses? Do we wear them because it's cool to look at? It is cool. I mean, James Dean, that's a pretty sexy look. If you want to be a cool looking dude kind of thing. But the reality is, what are you doing? You're essentially blocking the full spectrum of light from entering your eyes. That's not a good idea. The sun is not your enemy. If it's for glare, that's different. But most of the time, we don't wear sunglasses for glare. And also you're not supposed to look directly into the sun, generally speaking. So you just look away. Things like sunscreen. What are we doing? We're rubbing chemicals onto our skin. And yet, this again, we're assuming that the sun is the enemy. Why don't we just wear longer sleeves or stand in the shade if we're going to be out for extended periods of time? The Arabs seem to get this right. I don't think it's a good idea to be rubbing chemicals into your body like that, and because your body has to do something with that. And so that whole process, I think, plays into your health and your well-being. Getting enough sleep. I don't know what the formula is. I don't think anybody really knows. The 8 hours thing seems to be a bit of a thumbsuck. But the idea is to get enough sleep. If you get too little sleep, you will malfunction. You will get sick. If you're too stressed out, if your mental well-being is not in a great state, if you're constantly arguing and fighting, I've got to really destroy this one last guy on the internet, Gabriel. Just give me 1 second. I just got to take him out. What are you doing? Sometimes discourse is very, very good and very, very healthy. And of course, if your engagement is, in good faith and others will read it or follow it and learn from it, that's a good thing. A lot of the time, it's about flexing muscles and power games, and that I think is quite destructive. But the field of health goes so much further than just vaccines and what you're eating. Into fitness also. Fitness. I mean, I'm not fit. I'm not this bastion of male beauty, but I've got my own gym. As boring as this sounds, I mean, like we said earlier, this is not a sexy topic, but I get into the gym 2-3 times a week. I lift weights. I've got a barbell and I've got pull-up bars and squat rack and I do deadlifts and I do all the sort of old school army military kind of stuff so that I don't spend too much time in there. I really don't like spending a lot of time in the gym, but I like to get into the gym just so that when I'm old one day, I don't have to rely on a wheelchair or on crutches.
Bit of strength training every day. You don't have to be like one of these old people just limping. You don't have to be that person with the back bent over. Very simple.
Well, exactly. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about functional training. And I'm not doing it to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'm just doing it to invest in my future. And when when you got kids, you want to stay young for as long as possible.
Right. Also need a strong back for them.
Yes, exactly right. So, yeah, and I mean, so for me, this stuff is all super interesting. What to eat, like tonight, I've got something laid out. We're gonna it's all fresh food that we're gonna I'll probably make supper tonight. So I identify as African.
Right. Dricus du Plessis, the only African champion in MMA.
By the way, I went last year to MMA in Abu Dhabi. Man, that was amazing. It was the best bread and circuses I've had in a long time. It was so good. Thoroughly
that bread was tasty.
Woof,
let the meat cake.
I'll tell you, if you do watch a little bit of sports, and I don't mind actually watching a little bit of sports, because I think all of us also, by the way, for mental well-being, we do need a breakaway. This is part of
Oh, for
human
sure.
nature. Theater, or just getting away from reality for an hour or two, is very healthy. And when I went to the MMA, or I say MMA, but it was actually UFC. I mean, yeah, it's the same thing, I guess. I actually thought that Dricus was fighting. I got everything wrong. He was actually fighting in Chicago. I somehow got the entire story wrong, and I ended up in Abu Dhabi at the UFC thinking that Dricus was going to fight, and he wasn't even there. But I did enjoy it immensely. I was right in the front, and it was such a great time. I'll do it again. Watching UFC is just it takes you back to how you imagine the world was centuries ago. It's pretty primitive stuff. I mean, my wife doesn't understand. She's like, "Why do you want to see guys beating each other up?" I said to her, "I can't explain it."
No, it's great, and it's one of the only non-woke sporting companies in the world. That's another big reason to watch.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, if you listen to their Smack Talk, just quickly, Strickland, Sean Strickland, he's
buddy, now we're getting to the good stuff. Yeah,
he's got some great smack. I think the greatest Smack Talker of them all is what's his face from Ireland,
Conor McGregor.
Yeah, Conor McGregor. I think
Who the fuck is that guy?
He's the king of Smack Talk. But yeah, Dricus is, of course, from South Africa, and he was, I think, a good fighter. I don't think he's a good fighter anymore. I think everybody knows his style now. But anyway, sorry, I got distracted there. But I was just saying that for me, health is probably the most pivotal of them all, and that's why I cover a lot of it on my show. It's a very big topic, Gabriel. It goes far beyond technocracy. I mean, it's all fine and well to talk about digital ID, but then if you're sitting smoking cigarettes, and you're eating hamburgers,
you may as well have the digital ID at that point.
and by the way, I don't think cigarettes or smoking necessarily gives you cancer. That's another interesting thing. I don't think. I think it's the combustion of the various toxins that are carcinogenic, but I don't think smoking per se is something that gives you. I mean, people have been smoking for thousands of years.
Well, I'll tell you what. Let's leave that as a breadcrumb. You talk about you go down some very interesting rabbit holes on Jerm Warfare. So
yeah,
why don't we end it there? We'll tell people to follow up with you. It's jermwarfare.com, the podcast that you can with a J, yeah, JERM warfare.com. Look for it in your podcast feed. You've got a good thing going. Basically, you have your website community, and then once you get in there, you get access to all kinds of good stuff. Maybe final thoughts here. Tell people how to track down your stuff so they can hear more about you. As you said, you're an interviewer primarily. So you talk to some very interesting people. You ask some very good questions, lots of interesting subjects. Talk a little bit about how people can follow up with you.
I think I've done close to 2,000 interviews now. I say interview. I don't actually interview. I have conversations, and I wish I could take credit for that concept, but it was actually Joe Rogan's whole shtick. I don't interview, I have conversations, and I really, really liked that I decided to borrow it and try and copy it back in the day. Interviewing is very formal for me, and I'm not interested in just interviewing. I'm interested in also just learning about the person who I'm talking to and having a good time and having them back on my show. I know you've been on my show, I think, a couple times. I can't remember now. But I know you are coming back. And it goes beyond just the topic, and that's the whole sort of in actual fact, when I started my podcast, I used to drink alcohol while doing the conversations. But a lot of people moaned about that, said that it was disrespectful to the guests and all that. So I kind of stopped doing that. But I mean, I used to drink whiskey, while chatting to my guests. And it was fun when I recorded at night time. But a lot of my guests in the US, it was like daytime or morning, and then they can't drink whiskey with me. So then it's just weird. So I kind of stopped doing that. But yeah, I focus on conversations, and I try and cover a lot of ground because I'm trying to figure out how the puzzle all fits together, whether it's black nobility and who's right at the very top of the world, the world's sort of control structures, down to technocracy, down to what communism means, down to who built the pyramids, down to health, fitness, growing your own food, parallel systems, vaccines, you name it. Even revising history, from Hitler to Stalin. I did a great one a few months ago about how everything we think we know, how everything we think we know about Stalin is wrong. And I mean, that's a tricky one. I mean, that's a tough nut to crack, because everybody's got a very, very binary position on Stalin. To Mao, Chairman Mao, revising history, and this is not about simply creating new narratives. It's about digging into what actually is true. And so I've really, really learned a lot. I've changed my views on a lot of things as a result. So if anything, my show has also been just about me, trying to figure things out, and people have joined me in that journey. And so, so a lot of the stuff on my website is paywalled, but a lot of stuff is not paywalled. I actually would argue that there's probably a 50-50 breakdown in paywall versus free. People get upset when you say paywall. I think that if you honestly want people to do the kind of stuff that I do, and I suppose what you do, paywalling is a very helpful way of doing it. It creates not only a sense of community also, but it does help us do what we do, and to do it with a degree of independence, without having to resort to ads, and sponsors and all that kind of stuff. So, jermwarfare.com is where you'll find my archive of content. By the way, I'm also a cartoonist of like over 20 years, so a bunch of my cartoons on my website also, and I'm really expanding the whole experience now as I'm figuring things out as I go along. I do these sort of Zoom online meetups with our paid subscribers, and it's a lot of fun, and trying to get into sort of engaging more and more with everybody, so that it's not just me and them, it's us together. So yeah, jermwarfare.com is where it's at. I've currently not banned on any podcasting platform. I've been what's the word? I've returned to all the platforms that I was banned, excepting YouTube. But I was
reinstated.
Reinstated, yeah. So Spotify banned me 3 times, and now I'm no longer banned on Spotify. Apple has never banned me. YouTube, I think I could probably return to, but I haven't given it a go. I also got banned 3 times. And it's just a lot of work, So in terms of privacy, paywalling also helps with that, by the way, because then, the search engines and people who don't like you can't really access some of that stuff that they might want to, find gotchas in, so.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. No, you got a good thing going. Encourage people, start with the free stuff, Jerm Warfare, search in your RSS feeds. You might find yourself going to jermwarfare.com and joining the community. Got a good thing going on, Jeremy. And thank you once again.
Thanks, Gabriel. Appreciate it.